Good evening. I'm joined tonight by Mr. Terror to tell a total of 6 scary camping stories. After watching 3 here, make sure to check out his channel in the links provided for the other 3. Enjoy. Number 1. Goldilocks. When I was a teenager, my parents used to take me camping. I never cared for it, and not because of nature or manufactured hardships, but because they thought that spending a weekend in an RV in a small lot with a bunch of other people in RVs was camping. I liked the wilderness and felt like we should be camping in tents out in the woods, not sitting in the RV watching DVDs and eating microwave popcorn. So one night, on one of these trips, I decided to take matters into my own hands once they'd gone to sleep. I slipped out of the RV and past the campfires of the other so-called campers and into the woods that surrounded us. These woods were the reason people came here to camp, and I felt that we should actually go out into them and explore. It was a warm night, and the air smelled like wildflowers. Crickets and frogs chirped away, and eventually the noise from the campsite died away. I remember looking up at the bit of moon I could see through the trees and thinking, this is what camping was supposed to be. We had a small amount of woods close to our house, so I was no stranger to hiking. But I didn't think about the fact that this was a much bigger and much less familiar wood. I don't know how long I had been walking, but eventually the excitement and joy at experiencing the beauty of the night began to give way to hunger and a tinge of sleepiness. I decided I should probably head back, so I turned around and started walking. It wasn't long before I came across a creek. Well, this was odd. I don't recall seeing a creek on the walk out here. Had I gone the wrong way? Well, I knew that crossing the creek would definitely be wrong, so again I turned around and went the other way. It grew later, and I still didn't hear any sounds from the campground, though it was possible everyone had just gone to bed. After all, it had been nearly midnight when I had left. It was probably 2 or 3 right now, so they probably all just gone into their RVs and their big comfy beds and gone to sleep. But as I became more tired and more certain that I had gone the wrong way, I began longing for that same comfy bed and the safety of that RV. I no longer felt like mocking my parents for not experiencing the outdoors. How had I managed to get lost? Why didn't I mark my path like any intelligent person would? Frustrated, I began pushing my way through brush and around trees. Whenever I ended up back at the creek, I turned and went the other way. Finally, I decided to follow it, figuring it would have to end somewhere, and hopefully that somewhere would be the road. While these woods were bigger than the ones by our house, we still were in a campground right off the highway. I knew there was civilization close by. I just didn't know which direction it was in. I was nearly in tears out of frustration when I saw a light through the trees. Thinking it might be a campground or a street light, I began to go toward it. As I got closer, I realized it was too low for a street light, but that just meant it was most likely a person. I quickened my pace and came out in a very odd clearing. The light was an oil lamp, sitting on a card table, but there was no one around. The clearing was not empty though. It was full of furniture that was arranged like a house, but without the house. There was a rusted old washer and dryer next to each other, with a laundry basket on top. A living room had been made of a threadbare sofa, a broken armchair, and a very old TV with the screen smashed out. The card table with the oil lamp appeared to be part of the kitchen. A ruined old stove and refrigerator sans door completing the room. It was one of the strangest things I had ever seen. To top it off, whoever was living here had lit that oil lamp and then wandered off. I just didn't know what to make of it. Entranced, I walked through the houseless home and examined the items, my current situation completely slipping my mind. There were a couple throw pillows on the sofa, both equally threadbare. One still held some of its embroidery and seemed to say, "Bless this mess." Somehow, I doubt the person who made it had this place in mind. The laundry basket contained a raggedy teddy bear with an eye missing, random shoes that didn't seem to have mates, and a couple of books so water-damaged and old I was certain they would fall apart if I touched them. I wasn't about to open the washer and dryer. Even though I was already trespassing, I felt opening them was a lot more of a violation than walking into a house that had no walls. I walked over to the oil lamp. Other than the fact that it was lit, there wasn't anything special about it. In fact, it was the least special thing here, because it was in one piece and decently cared for. A faint odor caught my nose. It was similar to the horrid smell of roadkill after a few days, but so very faint, I almost didn't notice it. A chill went up my spine as I realized it was coming from the refrigerator's freezer compartment, which still had its door. It was closed, and some part of me, somewhere deep down, told me to leave. Get out now, and keep looking for a way back home, but I found myself reaching for the door's handle. My fingers brushed the metal. It seemed oddly chilly for such a warm night. Someone's been eating my porridge. I spun toward the voice, my heart in my throat. Across the clearing, the light from the lamp barely touching him, was a very large man. His beard was long and matted, his clothes ratty, and the shadows from the lamp made him look monstrous. We both stood there for what seemed like an eternity, and then I saw him move, and without thinking I turned and ran off into the woods. I ran blindly, no idea where I was going, but certain I had to get away from that place. My heart was pounding in my ears as I ran. I chanced to look over my shoulder, and I was certain the light was getting closer. I found a dense bit of brush and brambles and shimmied my way into them. They grabbed my hair and scratched my skin where it was bare, but I barely noticed. I was pretty sure if I could get deep into them, I could hide, so I ignored the pain and pushed through them until I felt like I was deep enough to not be seen. I stood as still as I could, barely peering through the branches as the light grew closer. Again, I heard that gravelly voice. "Where did you go, little Goldilocks?" I held my breath, which is much harder to do when you've been running and your lungs are screaming for air, but I couldn't let him find me. He kept going. I breathed again and waited until I didn't see any light from the lamp. I waited a while longer in case he came back this way, but he must have found another way home. I stood in the bushes in the darkness, not knowing where I was when I heard a familiar noise. It took me a minute to place it. It was slow at first, but as the sky began to turn gray, It became more frequent. They were cars. I'd found the highway. I left my hiding place and made my way out of the woods. The campfire was only a quarter-mile down the road. I was so grateful to be back that I never complained about my parents' idea of camping again.
Me and a few of my buddies go camping every summer. It's been something we have done since we graduated from high school. There were 4 of us, and we always had a really good time. After we graduated from college, we continued to do this. I was 23 years old when the strangest thing happened to us. We hiked out into the hills. We found our camping spot, about a 5 or 6 hour walk from where we parked. This was not an incorporated camping area. Hell, we didn't even know if we were allowed to camp there, or if we were trespassing. The first night went by fine. Nothing happened at all. We fished by a nearby stream. The second night, we were all sitting around the fire, drinking a little, smoking a little. We did the traditional scary storytelling as well. We stayed up way into the night. I, in fact, was so drunk I can't remember when I fell asleep. But, for some reason, I ended up in my buddy Jack's tent. None of us put out the fire before passing out, which was bad. When I woke up, I was trying to figure out where I was. Still pretty drunk and high. Jack was in the tent with me, but it was a big tent, so he was far away. I mean, nothing happened, if that is what you were thinking. I tried to figure out what woke me up. After a couple of moments, I heard a sound of someone walking around. It didn't alarm me at first, because there were 2 other people with us, so I didn't seem to worry. Soon, I saw the outline of a figure walking around the fire. He stood there for a moment, and I just assumed again that it was one of my friends. He turned and faced the tent and stood there for a minute. It was then that I realized this was not one of my friends. The man was much bigger. If you watch wrestling and know who Braun Strowman is, this man is likely around the size of him. He just stood there in front of the tent, obviously looking at us. His imposing figure looming over me. I tried not to move and hoped that he did not know I had been watching him. After a while, he finally turned away. He picked up what I assumed was a bucket of water and threw it over the fire. The fire went out. Then I couldn't see him anymore and didn't know where he was. I laid there in the tent, afraid to go back to sleep. Soon, however, the drunkenness took over and I passed out. I woke up to Jack shaking me. He was scared. He told me we had to pack up and get out of the woods. I was cranky and thought he was acting weird. But when I got out of the tent and looked at the fire pit we made, it was covered in blood. The man from the night used a bucket of some sort of blood to put out the fire. It was more than enough to scare the hell out of us. We packed up and tried quickly to get into the car. We kept expecting the big hillbilly to get us and to come with more crazy huge men. but it never happened. We got to the car and drove home. We continued our camping fun in future years, but never went back to that site.
Number 3. The Discovery. When I was a young man, I lived in a very rural part of Massachusetts. I was lucky, though, that 3 other kids about my age lived there. 3 of us were even in the same class. 1 was a few years ahead. We all lived on a mountain road that, along with another backwoods road, was also only partially paved. There were 2 highways, mostly used by trucks and people in a hurry to be somewhere else. They made an approximately 2-mile by 2-mile boxed-in area of thick, mixed forest and swamp. We lived on a mountain before the advent of the internet, and our parents complained about video games. We spent a lot of time in those woods. We played games, built stuff, and looked at porn, back when it came in paper form. And as we got older, burnt shit down and blew shit up. Point is, we loved those woods. And when you love something, it may seem to take on a life of its own. We all mostly stopped hanging out during high school, but around senior year, I was surprised to find a note in my locker from Ryan. He and I were the best of friends right up to our 2nd year, when he moved out of his parents' house, and then, like the others, we drifted apart. And the note said to meet him in the parking lot because he was visiting his mom and would drop me off at home. Riding the bus in high school sucks the big one, so it was an easy call to ride with an old friend for the 45-minute trip up the mountain instead. On the way up the mountain, he explained to me that the coming Friday he was getting the gang together to go camping in the woods. Though he didn't say it in any particular way, I knew he meant our woods, not just some campsite. And then he whipped out a half-ounce bag of magic mushrooms. I had seen them before, and seen people take them, but never had myself, but I wanted to. So when he asked if I was in, I high-fived him and said, hell yeah. That Friday night, when we marched into the woods, we didn't know exactly where we were going, but we knew exactly what we were going to do, get fucked up. We took the mushrooms just as the sun was going down. We added some booze and weed added to the mix as well, and had a ready supply of hot dogs and marshmallows. And by the time the stars were in full effect, so were we. Drunk, stoned, with full bellies and tripping balls. We just laid around the fire, talking nonsense about aliens, school girls, the trees, and how they were all connected to the earth and everything. Hey, we were really high. We had been laying there chatting and watching the stars swim around, when Dan suddenly sat up and pointed to the trees. There! Did anyone see that? We all sat up a bit, mostly laughing, thinking he was seeing things, but looked anyway. And what we saw we couldn't explain. It was like largest balls of light, appearing in the tops of the trees, then disappearing, only to reappear seconds later. Fueled by curiosity, alcohol, and drugs, we all agreed it was aliens. Aliens were in Windsor, Massachusetts, population of 300, to plan their world domination. But as we drew closer, There were strange noises to be heard as well. Strange thumping sounds, as well as what sounded like unearthly bells. Abrasive and tuneless, and the whirring and screeching of some sort of machines. If I hadn't been so wasted, and so hopped up on the nostalgia of being here with my friends, probably for the last time, we never would have gotten so close, because I would have almost immediately known what we were seeing. We all froze when we walked right into a big clearing filled with pot plants. On the other side of the clearing were 10 to 15 men, some setting up a pavilion building frame with metal pipes. The rest were harvesting the plants, and there was a boombox playing some sort of hip-hop. We wanted no part of this, and began to backtrack the way we came. We had not used flashlights, as the moon was enough for us to see by, and we had sobered up a bit, and we were confident in our ability to move through the woods quiet and undetected. I mean, we grew up in those woods after all. But we all froze again, and this time, in true terror, we suddenly heard footsteps approaching us and a beam of light bouncing towards us. We had no time, and as the beam of light swung over us, I was sure we were screwed. I will always believe the forest saved us that day. There was no way that man didn't see us, just no way. The beam of his light shone on us for a full second, before it suddenly went out. We stayed still as stone, barely even daring to breathe, as we heard the man curse his luck and his boss for buying cheap batteries. As he plodded past us, missing us by less than a foot, we heard him speak into a walkie. Although it was dark, we could make out the outline of a rifle that he was carrying, now resting on his shoulder. He said, "Hey, I didn't see anyone out here. I'm coming back in for a new battery. Tell Mike to buy some decent ones next time." We wasted no time getting back to the campsite, packing the party up and taking it to Ben's house. His parents had left him the house while they spent a year touring Europe. We spent the rest of the night in the basement, drinking and smoking weed, reliving the event to each other as we tried to calm down. Aside from that, at graduation and the party after, I didn't see any of them again. We all went to different colleges and on to our busy adult lives. But I will always remember that night in the woods, and our fifth friend, who I will always believe saved us that day. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. First, thanks to Mr. Terror for working in this collaboration. As I tell everyone who works with me, thanks for your patience because I know working with me is a pain. Please check out the second half of the collaboration in the links provided, either in the description or using the end screen button that will appear at the end of this closing. Make sure to subscribe to Mr. Terror too, as I'm sure you enjoy his channel. I hope you like these camping stories. I have a general subscriber story video coming up soon, and I know a lot of you have sent me stories and have patiently waited for me to get the video up, but it will be out this week, I promise. All in all though, this seemed to be a bit of a slow month for horror. I was expecting that chainsaw video to be a really major thing, and it looks like I was wrong about that. Well, maybe chainsaws just aren't that scary. If you want to see print versions of these stories, please visit the Killer Orange Cat subreddit in the link provided in the description. There is also a link to Killer Orange Fashion, which is a separate merchandise store from the Teespring one that you will see under this video. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the subscribe button below, or use the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter, using the links provided in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. And whatever you do, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.